Chapter 3. Put down that paper and talk to me. Report talk and report talk. I was sitting in a suburban living room, speaking to a women's group that had invited men to join them for the occasion of my talk about communication between men and women. During the discussion, one man was particularly talkative, full of lengthy comments and explanations. When I made the observation that women often complain that their husbands do not talk to them enough, this man volunteered that he heartily agreed. He gestured toward his wife, who had sat silently beside him on the couch throughout the evening, and said, "She is the talker in our family." Everyone in the room burst into laughter. The man looked puzzled and hurt. "It's true," he explained. "When I come home from work, I usually have nothing to say. But she never runs out. If it weren't for her, we'd spend the whole evening in silence." Another woman expressed a similar paradox about her husband. "When we go out, he is the life of the party. If I happen to be in another room, I can always hear his voice above the others. But when we're home, he doesn't have that much to say. I do most of the talking." Who talks more, women or men? According to the stereotype, women talk too much. Linguist Jennifer Coates notes some proverbs. "A woman's tongue wags like a lamb's tail." "Foxes are all tail and women are all tongue." "The North Sea will sooner be found wanting in water than a woman be at a loss for a word." Throughout history, women have been punished for talking too much or in the wrong way. Linguist Connie Ebel lists a variety of physical punishments used in colonial America. Women were strapped to ducking stools and held underwater until they nearly drowned. Put into the stocks with signs pinned to them, gagged and silenced by a cleft stick applied to their tongues. Though such institutionalized corporal punishments have given way to informal, often psychological ones, modern stereotypes are not much different from those expressed in the old proverbs. Women are believed to talk too much, yet study after study finds that it is men who talk more at meetings, in mixed group discussions, and in classrooms where girls or young women sit next to boys or young men. For example, communication researchers Barbara and Jean Eakins tape recorded and studied 7 university faculty meetings. They found that, with one exception, men spoke more often, and without exception spoke for a longer time. The men's turns ranged from 10.66 to 17.07 seconds, while the women's turns ranged from 3 to 10 seconds. In other words, the women's longest turns were still shorter than the men's shortest turns. When a public lecture is followed by questions from the floor, or a talk show host opens the phones, the first voice to be heard asking a question is almost always a man's. And when they ask questions or offer comments from the audience, men tend to talk longer. Linguist Marjorie Swacker recorded question and answer sessions at academic conferences. Women were highly visible as speakers at the conferences studied. They presented 40.7% of the papers at the conferences studied and made up 42% of the audience. But when it came to volunteering and being called on to ask questions, women contributed only 27.4%. Furthermore, the women's question, on the average, took less than half as much time as the men's. The mean was 23.1 seconds for women, 52.7 for men. This happens, Swacker shows, because men, but not women, tended to preface their questions with statements, ask more than one question, and follow up the speaker's answer with another question or comment. I have observed this pattern in my own lectures, which concern issues of direct relevance to women. Regardless of the proportion of men and women in the audience, men almost invariably ask the first question, more questions, and longer questions. In these situations, women often feel that men are talking too much. I recall one discussion period following a lecture I gave to a group assembled in a bookstore. The group was composed mostly of women, but most of the discussion was being conducted by men in the audience. At one point, a man sitting in the middle was talking at such great length that several women in the front rows began shifting in their seats and rolling their eyes at me. Ironically, what he was going on about was how frustrated he feels when he has to listen to women going on and on about topics he finds boring and unimportant. Rapport talk and report talk. Who talks more then, women or men? The seemingly contradictory evidence is reconciled by the difference between what I called public and private speaking. More men feel comfortable doing public speaking, while more women feel comfortable doing private speaking. Another way of capturing these differences is by using the terms rapport talk and report talk. For most women, the language of conversation is primarily a language of rapport, a way of establishing connections and negotiating relationships. Emphasis is placed on displaying similarities and matching experiences. From childhood, girls criticize peers who try to stand out or appear better than others. People feel their closest connections at home or in settings where they feel at home with one or a few people they feel close to and comfortable with. In other words, during private speaking. But even the most public situations can be approached like private speaking. For most men, talk is primarily a means to preserve independence and negotiate and maintain status in a hierarchical social order. This is done by exhibiting knowledge and skill and by holding center stage through verbal performance such as storytelling, joking, or imparting information. From childhood, men learn to use talking as a way to get and keep attention. So they are more comfortable speaking in larger groups made up of people they know less well, in the broadest sense, public speaking. But even the most private situations can be approached like public speaking, more like giving a report than establishing rapport. Private speaking, the wordy woman and the mute man. What is the source of the stereotype that women talk a lot? Dale Spender suggests that most people feel instinctively, if not consciously, that women, like children, should be seen and not heard. So any amount of talk from them seems like too much. Studies have shown that if men and women talk equally in a group, people think the women talked more. So there is truth to Spender's view. But another explanation is that men think women talk a lot because they hear women talking in situations where men would not, on the telephone, or in social situations with friends, where they are not discussing topics that men find inherently interesting, or like the couple at the women's group at home alone. In other words, in private speaking. Home is the setting for an American icon that features the silent man and the talkative woman, and this icon, which grows out of the different goals and habits I have been describing, explains why the complaint, most often voiced by women about the men with whom they are intimate, is "he doesn't talk to me," and the second most frequent is "he doesn't listen to me." A woman who wrote to Ann Landers is typical. "My husband never speaks to me when he comes home from work. When I ask how did everything go today, he says rough, or it's a jungle out there." We live in Jersey and he works in New York City. It's a different story when we have guests or go visiting. Paul is the gabbiest guy in the crowd, a real spellbinder. He comes up with the most interesting stories. People hang on every word. I think to myself, why doesn't he ever tell me these things? This has been going on for 38 years. Paul started to go quiet on me after 10 years of marriage. I could never figure out why. Can you solve the mystery? The Invisible Woman. Ann Lander suggests that the husband may not want to talk because he is tired when he comes home from work. Yet women who work come home tired too, and they are nonetheless eager to tell their partners or friends everything that happened to them during the day, and what these fleeting daily dramas made them think and feel. Sources as lofty as studies conducted by psychologists, as down-to-earth as letters written to advice columnists, and as sophisticated as movies and plays, come up with the same insight. Men's silence at home is a disappointment to women. Again and again women complain, "He seems to have everything to say to everyone else, and nothing to say to me." The film, Divorce American Style, opens with a conversation in which Debbie Reynolds is claiming that she and Dick Van Dyke don't communicate, and he's protesting that he tells her everything that's on his mind. The doorbell interrupts their quarrel, and husband and wife compose themselves before opening the door to greet their guests with cheerful smiles. Behind closed doors, many couples are having conversations like this. Like the character played by Debbie Reynolds, women feel men don't communicate. Like the husband played by Dick Van Dyke, men feel wrongly accused. How can she be convinced that he doesn't tell her anything, while he is equally convinced that he tells her everything that's on his mind? How can women and men have such different ideas about the same conversations? When something goes wrong, people look around for a source to blame, either the person they are trying to communicate with, "You are demanding, self-centered, stubborn," or the group that the other person belongs to. All women are demanding. All men are self-centered. Some generous-minded people blame the relationship. "We just can't communicate." But underneath or overlaid on these types of blame cast outward, most people believe that something is wrong with them. If individual people or particular relationships were to blame, there wouldn't be so many different people having the same problems. The real problem is conversational style. Women and men have different ways of talking. even with the best intentions, trying to settle the problem through talk can only make things worse if it is ways of talking that are causing trouble in the first place. Best friends. Once again, the seeds of women's and men's styles are sown in the ways they learn to use language while growing up. In our culture, most people, but especially women, look to their closest relationships as havens in a hostile world. The center of a little girl's social life is her best friend. Girls' friendships are made and maintained by telling secrets. For grown women too, the essence of friendship is talk, telling each other what they are thinking and feeling, and what happened that day, who was at the bus stop, who called, what they said, how that made them feel. When asked who their best friends are, most women name other women they talk to regularly. When asked the same question, most men will say it's their wives. After that, many men name other men with whom they do things, such as play tennis or baseball, but never just sit and talk. Or a chum from high school whom they haven't spoken to in a year. When Debbie Reynolds complained that Dick Van Dyke didn't tell her anything, and he protested that he did, both were right. She felt he didn't tell her anything because he didn't tell her the fleeting thoughts and feelings he experienced throughout the day, the kind of talk she would have with her best friend. He didn't tell her these things because to him they didn't seem like anything to tell. He told her anything that seemed important, anything he would tell his friends. Men and women often have very different ideas of what's important and at what point important topics should be raised. A woman told me with lingering incredulity of a conversation with her boyfriend. Knowing he had seen his friend Oliver, she asked, "What's new with Oliver?" He replied, "Nothing." But later in the conversation, it came out that Oliver and his girlfriend had decided to get married. "That's nothing?" the woman gasped in frustration and disbelief. For men, nothing may be a ritual response at the start of a conversation. A college woman missed her brother but rarely called him, because she found it difficult to get talk going. A typical conversation began with her asking, "What's up with you?" and his replying, "Nothing." Hearing his "nothing" as meaning, "There's nothing personal I want to talk about," she supplied talk by filling him in on her news, and eventually hung up in frustration. But when she thought back, she remembered that later in the conversation he had mumbled, "Christy and I got into another fight." This came so late and so low that she didn't pick up on it, and he was probably equally frustrated that she didn't. Many men honestly do not know what women want, and women honestly do not know why men find what they want so hard to comprehend and deliver. Talk to me. Women's dissatisfaction with men's silence at home is captured in the stock cartoon setting of a breakfast table at which a husband and wife are sitting. He is reading a newspaper, she is glaring at the back of the newspaper. In a Dagwood strip, Blondie complains, "Every morning all he sees is the newspaper. I'll bet you don't even know I'm here." Dagwood reassures her, "Of course I know you are here. You are my wonderful wife, and I love you very much." With this, he unseeingly pats the paw of a family dog, which the wife has put in her place before leaving the room. The cartoon strip shows that Blondie is justified in feeling like the woman who wrote to Anne Landers. Invisible. Another cartoon shows a husband opening a newspaper and asking his wife, "Is there anything you would like to say to me before I begin reading the newspaper?" The reader knows that there isn't, but that as soon as he begins reading the paper, she will think of something. The cartoon highlights the difference in what men and women think talk is for. To him, talk is for information. So when his wife interrupts his reading, it must be to inform him of something that he needs to know. This being the case, she might as well tell him what she thinks he needs to know before he starts reading. But to her, talk is for interaction. Telling things is a way to show involvement, and listening is a way to show interest and caring. It is not an odd coincidence that she always thinks of things to tell him when he is reading. She feels the need for verbal interaction most keenly when he is, unaccountably, from her point of view, buried in the newspaper instead of talking to her. Yet another cartoon shows a wedding cake that has on top, in place of the plastic statues of bride and groom in tuxedo and gown, a breakfast scene in which an unshaven husband reads a newspaper across the table from his disgruntled wife. The cartoon reflects the enormous gulf between the romantic expectations of marriage, represented by the plastic couple in traditional wedding costume, and the often disappointing reality, represented by the two sides of the newspaper at the breakfast table, the front which he is reading, and the back at which she is glaring. These cartoons, and many other on the same theme, are funny because people recognize their own experiences in them. What's not funny is that many women are deeply hurt when men don't talk to them at home, and men are deeply frustrated by feeling they have disappointed their partners without understanding how they failed or how else they could have behaved. Some men are further frustrated because, as one put it, "When in the world am I supposed to read the morning newspaper?" If many women are incredulous that many men do not exchange personal information with their friends, this man is incredulous that many women do not bother to read the morning paper. To him, reading the paper is an essential part of his morning ritual, and his whole day is awry if he doesn't get to read it. In his words, reading the newspaper in the morning is as important to him as putting makeup in the morning is to many women he knows. Yet many women, he observed, either don't subscribe to a paper or don't read it until they get home in the evening. "I find this very puzzling," he said. "I can't tell you how often I have picked up a woman's morning newspaper from her front door in the evening and handed it to her when she opened the door for me." To this man, and I am sure many others, a woman who objects to his reading the morning paper is trying to keep him from doing something essential and harmless. It's a violation of his independence, his freedom of action. But when a woman who expects her partner to talk to her is disappointed that he doesn't, she perceives his behavior as a failure of intimacy. He's keeping things from her. He has lost interest in her. He is pulling away. A woman I will call Rebecca, who is generally quite happily married, told me that this is the one source of serious dissatisfaction with her husband, Stuart. Her term for his taciturnity is stinginess of spirit. She tells him what she is thinking, and he listens silently. She asks him what he is thinking, and he takes a long time to answer, "I don't know." In frustration, she challenges, "Is there nothing on your mind?" For Rebecca, who is accustomed to expressing her fleeting thoughts and opinions as they come to her, saying nothing means thinking nothing. But Stuart does not assume that his passing thoughts are worthy of utterance. He is not in the habit of uttering his fleeting ruminations. So, just as Rebecca naturally speaks her thoughts, he naturally dismisses his as soon as they occur to him. Speaking them would give them more weight and significance than he feels they merit. All her life she has had practiced in verbalizing her thoughts and feelings in private conversations with people she is close to. All his life he has had practiced in dismissing his and keeping them to himself. What to do with doubts? In the above example, Rebecca was not talking about any particular kind of thoughts or feeling, just whatever Stuart might have had in mind. But the matter of giving voice to thoughts and feelings becomes particularly significant in the case of negative feelings or doubts about a relationship. This difference was highlighted for me when a 50-year-old divorced man told me about his experiences in forming new relationships with women. On this matter he was clear. "I do not value my fleeting thoughts, and I do not value the fleeting thoughts of others." He felt that the current relationship he was in had been endangered, even permanently weakened, by the woman's practice of tossing out her passing thoughts, because early in their courtship many of her thoughts were fears about their relationship. Not surprisingly, since they did not know each other well, she worried about whether she could trust him, whether their relationship would destroy her independence, whether this relationship was really right for her. He felt she should have kept these doubts and fears to herself and waited to see how things turned out. As it happens, things turned out well. The woman decided that the relationship was right for her. She could trust him, and she did not have to give up her independence. But he felt, at the time that he told me of this, that he had still not recovered from the wear and tear of coping with her earlier doubts. As he put it, he was still dizzy from having been bounced around like a yo-yo, tied to the stream of her consciousness. In contrast, this man admitted, he himself goes to the other extreme. He never expresses his fears and misgivings about their relationship at all. If he's unhappy but doesn't say anything about it, his unhappiness expresses itself in a kind of distancing coldness. This response is just what women fear most, and just the reason they prefer to express dissatisfactions and doubts as an antidote to the isolation and distance that would result from keeping them to themselves. The different perspectives on expressing or concealing dissatisfactions and doubts may reflect a difference in men's and women's awareness of the power of their words to affect others. In repeatedly telling him what she feared about their relationship, this woman spoke as though she assumed he was invulnerable and could not be hurt by what she said. Perhaps she was underestimating the power of her words to affect him. For his part, when he refrains from expressing negative thoughts or feelings, he seems to be overestimating the power of his words to hurt her, when, ironically, she is more likely to be hurt by his silence than his words. These women and men are talking in ways they learned as children and reinforced as young adults and then adults in their same gender friendships. For girls, talk is the glue that holds relationships together. Boys' relationships are held together primarily by activities, doing things together, or talking about activities such as sports or later politics. The forums in which men are most inclined to talk are those in which they feel the need to impress, in situations where their status is in question. Making adjustments. Such impasses will perhaps never be settled to the complete satisfaction of both parties, but understanding the differing views can help detoxify the situation and both can make adjustments. Realizing that men and women have different assumptions about the place of talk in relationships, a woman can observe a man's desire to read the morning paper at the breakfast table without interpreting it as a rejection of her or a failure of their relationship. And a man can understand a woman's desire for talk without interpreting it as an unreasonable demand or a manipulative attempt to prevent him from doing what he wants to do. A woman who had heard my interpretation of these differences between men and women told me how these insights helped her. Early in a promising relationship, a man spent the night at her apartment. It was a weeknight, and they both had to go to work the next day. So she was delighted when he made the rash and romantic suggestion that they have breakfast together and report late for work. She happily prepared breakfast, looking forward to the scene shaped in her mind. They would sit facing each other across her small table, looking into each other's eyes, and say how much they liked each other and how happy they were about their growing friendship. It was against the backdrop of this heady expectation that she confronted an entirely different scene. As she placed on the table an array of lovingly prepared eggs, toast, and coffee, the man sat across her small table and opened the newspaper in front of his face. If suggesting they have breakfast together had seemed like an invitation to get closer, in her view, or obstructing her view, the newspaper was now erected as a paper-thin, but nonetheless impenetrable, barrier between them. Had she known nothing of the gender differences I discuss, she would simply have felt hurt, and dismissed this man as yet another clunker. She would have concluded that, having enjoyed the night with her, he was now availing himself of her further services as a short-order cook. Instead, she realized that, unlike her, he did not feel the need for talk to reinforce their intimacy. The companionability of her presence was all he needed, and that did not mean that he didn't cherish her presence. By the same token, had he understood the essential role played by talk in women's definition of intimacy, he could have put off reading the paper and avoided putting her off. The comfort of home. For everyone, home is a place to be off stage, but the comfort of home can have opposite and incompatible meanings for women and men. For many men, the comfort of home means freedom from having to prove themselves and impress through verbal display. At last, they are in a situation where Talk is not required. They are free to remain silent. But for women, home is a place where they are free to talk and where they feel the greatest need to talk with those they are closest to. For them, the comfort of home means the freedom to talk without worrying about how their talk will be judged. This view emerged in a study by linguist Alice Greenwood of the conversations that took place among her three pre-adolescent children and their friends. Her daughters and son gave different reasons for their preferences in dinner guests. Her daughter, Stacy, said she would not want to invite people she didn't know well, because then she would have to be polite and quiet and put on good manners. Greenwood's other daughter, Denise, said she liked to have her friend Meryl over because she could act crazy with Meryl and did not have to worry about her manners, as she would with certain other friends who would go around talking to people probably. But Denise's twin brother, Dennis, said nothing about having to watch his manners or worry about how others would judge his behavior. He simply said that he liked to have over friends with whom he could joke and laugh a lot. The girls' comments show that for them, being close means being able to talk freely, and being with relative strangers means having to watch what they say and do. This insight holds a clue to the riddle of who talks more, women or men. Public speaking, the talkative man and the silent woman. So far, I have been discussing the private scenes in which many men are silent and many women are talkative. But there are other scenes in which the roles are reversed. Returning to Rebecca and Stuart, we saw when they are home alone, Rebecca's thoughts find their way into words effortlessly, whereas Stuart finds he can't come up with anything to say. The reverse happens when they are in other situations. For example, at a meeting of the neighborhood council or the parents' association at their children's school, it is Stuart who stands up and speaks. In that situation, it is Rebecca who is silent, her tongue tied by an acute awareness of all the negative reactions people could have to what she might say, all the mistakes she might make in trying to express her ideas. If she musters her courage and prepares to say something, she needs time to formulate it and then waits to be recognized by the chair. She cannot just jump up and start talking the way Stuart and some other men can. Eleanor Smeal, president of the Fund for Feminist Majority, was a guest on a call-in radio talk show discussing abortion. No subject could be of more direct concern to women. Yet during the hour-long show, all the callers except two were men. Diane Ram, host of a radio talk show, expresses puzzlement that although the audience of her show is evenly split between men and women, 90% of the callers to the show are men. I am convinced that the reason is not that women are uninterested in the subjects discussed on the show. I would wager that women listeners are bringing up the subjects they heard on the Diane Ram show to their friends and family over lunch, tea, and dinner, but fewer of them call in, because to do so would be putting themselves on display, claiming public attention for what they have to say, catapulting themselves onto center stage. I myself have been the guest on innumerable radio and television talk shows. Perhaps I am unusual in being completely at ease in this mode of display, but perhaps I am not unusual at all, because although I am comfortable in the role of invited expert, I have never called in to a talk show I was listening to, although I have often had ideas to contribute. When I am the guest, My position of authority is granted before I begin to speak. Were I to call in, I would be claiming that right on my own. I would have to establish my credibility by explaining who I am, which might seem self aggrandizing, or not explain who I am and risk having my comments ignored or not valued. For similar reasons, though I am comfortable lecturing to groups numbering in the thousands, I rarely ask questions following another lecturer's talk, unless I know both the subject and the group very well. My own experiences and that of talk show hosts seems to hold a clue to the difference in men's and women's attitudes toward talk. Many men are more comfortable than most women in using talk to claim attention, and this difference lies at the heart of the distinction between rapport talk and report talk. Report talk in private. Report talk, or what I am calling public speaking, does not arise only in the literally public situation of formal speeches delivered to a listening audience. The more people there are in a conversation, the less well you know them, and the more status differences among them, the more a conversation is like public speaking or report talk. The fewer the people, the more intimately you know them, and the more equal their status, the more it is like private speaking or rapport talk. Furthermore, women feel a situation is more public in the sense that they have to be on good behavior if there are men present, except perhaps for family members. Yet, even in families, the mother and children may feel their home to be backstage when father is not home, on stage when he is. Many children are instructed to be on good behavior when daddy is home. This may be because he is not home often, or because mother or father does not want the children to disturb him when he is. The difference between public and private speaking also explains the stereotype that women don't tell jokes. Although some women are great raconteurs who can keep a group spellbound by recounting jokes and funny stories, there are fewer such personalities among women than among men. Many women who do tell jokes to large groups of people come from ethnic backgrounds in which verbal performance is highly valued. For example, many of the great women stand-up comics, such as Fanny Brice and Joan Rivers, came from Jewish backgrounds. Although it's not true that women don't tell jokes, it is true that women are less likely than men to tell jokes in large groups, especially groups including men. So it's not surprising that men get the impression that women never tell jokes at all. Folklorist Carol Mitchell studied joke telling on a college campus. She found that men told most of their jokes to other men, but they also told many jokes to mixed groups or to women. Women, however, told most of their jokes to other women, fewer to men, and very few to groups that included men as well as women. Men preferred and were most likely to tell jokes when they had an audience, at least two, often four or more. Women preferred a small audience of one or two, rarely more than three. Unlike men, they were reluctant to tell jokes in front of people they didn't know well. Many women flatly refused to tell jokes they knew if there were four or more in the group, promising to tell them later in private. Men never refused the invitation to tell jokes. All of Mitchell's results fit in with the picture I have been drawing of public and private speaking. In a situation where there are more people in the audience, more men or more strangers, joke telling, like any other form of verbal performance, requires speakers to claim center stage and prove their abilities. These are the situations in which many women are reluctant to talk. in a situation that is more private because the audience is small, familiar, and perceived to be members of a community, for example, other women, they are more likely to talk. The idea that telling jokes is a kind of self-display does not imply that it is selfish or self-centered. The situation of joke telling illustrates that status and connection entail each other. Entertaining others is a way of establishing connections with them, and joke telling can be a kind of and telling jokes can be a kind of gift giving, where the joke is a gift that brings pleasure to receivers. The key issue is asymmetry. One person is the teller and the others are the audience. If these roles are later exchanged, for example, if the joke telling becomes a round in which one person after another takes the role of teller, then there is symmetry on the broad scale, if not in the individual act. However, if women habitually take the role of appreciative audience and never take the role of joke teller, the asymmetry of the individual joke telling is diffused through the larger interaction as well. This is a hazard for women. A hazard for men is that continually telling jokes can be distancing. This is the effect felt by a man who complained that when he talks to his father on the phone, all his father does is tell him jokes. An extreme instance of a similar phenomenon is the class clown, who, according to teachers, is nearly always a boy. Rapport talk in public. Just as conversations that take place at home among friends can be like public speaking, even a public address can be like private speaking. For example, by giving a lecture full of personal examples and stories. At the executive committee of a fledgling professional organization, the outgoing president, Fran, suggested that the organization adopt the policy of having presidents deliver a presidential address. To explain and support her proposal, she told a personal anecdote. Her cousin was the president of a more established professional organization at the time that Fran held the same position in this one. Fran's mother had been talking to her cousin's mother on the telephone. Her cousin's mother told Fran's mother that her daughter was preparing her presidential address, and she asked when Fran's presidential address was scheduled to be. Fran was embarrassed to admit to her mother that she was not giving one. This made her wonder whether the organization's professional identity might not be enhanced if it emulated the more established organizations. Several men on the committee were embarrassed by Fran's reference to her personal situation and were not convinced by her argument. It seemed to them not only irrelevant but unseemly to talk about her mother's telephone conversations at an executive committee meeting. Fran had approached the meeting, a relatively public context, as an extension of the private kind. Many women's tendency to use personal experiences and examples rather than abstract argumentation can be understood from the perspective of their orientation to language as it is used in private speaking. A study by Celia Roberts and Tom Jupp of a faculty meeting at a secondary school in England found that the women's arguments did not carry weight with their male colleagues because they tended to use their own experiences as evidence or argue about the effect of policy on individual students. The men at the meeting argue from a completely different perspective, making categorical statements about right and wrong. The same distinction is found in discussions at home. A man told me that he felt critical of what he perceived as his wife's lack of logic. For example, he recalled a conversation in which he had mentioned an article he had read in the New York Times, claiming that today's college students are not as idealistic as students were in the 1960s. He was inclined to accept this claim. His wife questioned it, supporting her argument with the observation that her niece and her niece's friends were very idealistic indeed. He was incredulous and scornful of her faulty reasoning. It was obvious to him that a single person example is neither evidence nor argumentation, it's just anecdote. It did not occur to him that he was dealing with a different logical system rather than a lack of logic. The logic this woman was employing was making sense of the world as a more private endeavor, observing and integrating her personal experience and drawing conclusions to the experiences of others. The logic the husband took for granted was a more public endeavor, more like gathering information, conducting a survey, or devising arguments by rules of formal logic as one might in doing research. Another man complained about what he and his friends call women's shifting sands approach to discussion. These men feel that whereas they try to pursue an argument logically, step by step, until it is settled, women continually change course in midstream. He pointed to the short excerpt from Divorce American Style quoted above as a case in point. It seemed to him that when Debbie Reynolds said, "I can't argue now, I have to take French bread out of the oven," she was evading the argument because she had made an accusation, "All you do is criticize," that she could not support. This man also offered an example from his own experience. Her girlfriend had told him of a problem she had because her boss wanted her to do one thing and she wanted to do another. Taking the boss's view for the sake of argumentation, he pointed out a negative consequence that would result if she did what she wanted. She countered that the same negative consequence would result if she did what the boss wanted. He complained that she was shifting to the other field of battle. What would happen if she followed her boss's will before they had made headway with the first? What would happen if she followed her own? Speaking for the team. A final puzzle on the matter of public and private speaking is suggested by the experience I related at the opening of this chapter, in which a women's group I addressed had invited men to participate, and the talkative man had referred to his silent wife as the talker in our family. Following their laughter, other women in the group commented that this woman was not usually silent. When their meetings consisted of women only, she did her share of talking. Why, then, she was silent on this occasion? One possibility is that my presence transformed the private speaking group into a public speaking event. Another transformation was that there were men in the group. In a sense, most women feel they are backstage when there are no men around. When men are present, women are on stage, insofar as they feel they must watch their behavior more. Another possibility is that it was not the presence of men in general that affected this woman's behavior, but the presence of her husband. One interpretation is that she was somehow cowed or silenced by her husband's presence, but another is that she felt they were a team. Since he was talking a lot, the team would be taking up too much time if she spoke too. She also may have felt that because he was representing their team, she didn't have to, much as many women let their husbands drive if they are in the car, but do the driving themselves if their husbands are not there. Obviously, not every woman becomes silent when her husband joins a group. After all, there were many women in the group who talked a lot, and many had brought spouses. But several other couples told me of similar experiences. For example, when one couple took evening classes together, he was always an active participant in class discussion, while she said very little. But one semester they had decided to take different classes, and then she found that she was the talkative member of the class she attended alone. Such a development can be viewed in two different ways. If talking in a group is a good thing, a privilege and a pleasure, then the silent woman will be seen as deprived of her right to speak, deprived of her voice. But the pleasures of report talk are not universally admired. There are many who do not wish to speak in a group. In this view, a woman who feels she has no need to speak because her husband is doing it for her might feel privileged, just as a woman who does not like to drive might feel lucky that she doesn't have to when her husband is there, and a man who does not like to drive might feel unlucky that he has to, like it or not. Avoiding mutual blame. The difference between private and public speaking, or rapport talk and report talk, can be understood in terms of status and connection. It is not surprising that women are most comfortable talking when they feel safe and close, among friends and equals, whereas men feel comfortable talking when there is a need to establish and maintain their status in a group. But the situation is complex because status and connection are bought with the same currency. What seems like a bid for status could be intended as a display of closeness, and what seems like distancing may have been intended to avoid the appearance of pulling rank. Hurtful and unjustified misinterpretations can be avoided by understanding the conversational styles of the other gender. When men do all the talking at meetings, many women, including researchers, see them as dominating the meeting, intentionally preventing women from participating, publicly flexing their higher status muscles. But the result that men do most of the talking does not necessarily mean that men intend to prevent women from speaking. Those who readily speak up assume that others are as free as they are to take the floor. In this sense, men's speaking out freely can be seen as evidence that they assume that women are at the same level of status. We are all equals. The meta message of their behavior could be competing for the floor. If this is indeed the intention, and I believe it often, though not always is, a woman can recognize women's lack of participation at meetings and take measures to redress the imbalance without blaming men for intentionally locking them out. The culprit, then, is not an individual man or even men's styles alone, but the difference between men's and women's styles. If that is the case, then both can make adjustments. A woman can push herself to speak up without being invited, or begin to speak without waiting for what seems a polite pause. But the adjustment should not be one-sided. A man can learn that a woman who is not accustomed to speaking up in groups is not free as he is to do so. Someone who is waiting for a nice long pause before asking her question does not find the stage set for her appearance, as do those who are not awaiting applause. The moment after or before another speaker stops talking, someone who expects to be invited to speak, "You haven't said much, Millie. What do you think?" is not accustomed to leaping in and claim the floor for herself. As in so many areas, being admitted as an equal is not itself assurance of equal opportunity if one is not accustomed to playing the game in the way it is being played. Being admitted to a dance does not ensure the participation of someone who has learned to dance to a different rhythm.